Christmas on Jane Street, Chapter 4, Night on the Town. My Christmas trees had been marching off Jane Street into their new homes in record numbers these past 2.5 weeks, and Ellie had already made and sold 3 batches of 24 candles each. Not one to be outdone by her big sister, Henry had started his own business. At first, his scheme was to sell candles identical to hers and undercut her price. When I put my foot down, we came up with the idea of his selling boughs. Henry sold the branches that we snipped off trees when we pruned cumbersome boughs or trimmed the trunks. He gathered them up into a giant bundle and invited customers to pick out as many as they pleased. Then, according to the size of the bundle, he set the price that usually ranged between 50 cents and $1. He tallied his seasonal total every day and let us all know what it was. Since starting, he'd already made $63, and unlike his sister, he had no expenses. For her part, Ellie refused to divulge her earnings, but I could tell she was doing well. Probably because our totals at the Christmas tree stand kept rising and were starting to amount to something substantial, my spirits had been climbing with them. I had to remind myself not to get giddy about how well we were doing this season. Even with one good sales month, our family finances were far from being out of the woods, and I had to keep pushing myself to maximize for sales the rest of the season. Thankfully, we had moved out of the rainy spell of early December into cool, crisp weather that was ideal for selling trees. Any retailer will tell you that you need a nip in the air to put Christmas in people's minds. My worst season ever was the December when the weather was unseasonably warm. Christmas just crept up on everyone without warning. Whenever possible, I make a point to do little favors for people, to spread goodwill from our corner. I do these things not just for my customers, but for regulars on the street too. One of my favorites is hailing cabs for people who travel uptown every morning. I always get a kick out of pointing to where I want the cab to stop, pointing the door and opening the door and settling my charge into the seat like a concierge at some fancy hotel. Everyone, especially those who's unaccustomed to this kind of service, is delighted. Once I did this for a man I'd seen on the street only a few times, but we never talked. I hailed a cab for him and opened the door precisely as he stepped up to the curb. Not 1 second of his time was wasted. He seemed surprised, then tried to reach into his billfold to tip me. I waved away his money. "I do this for our own public relations department," I said. "Just tell your friends where to buy their tree." He looked puzzled for an instant. Then he smiled. It dawned on him that I was the public relations department. My cheerful mood at the stand in the camper helped raise my family spirits. Though relations with Ellie had not returned to the idyllic state of the years before, they had improved. I still didn't approve of what she was saving for, but couldn't argue with her enterprise. She stopped giving me the cold shoulder and even asked my opinion a time or two about such things as whether to buy fancy bags for her customers or to reuse the old bags that we had saved. Leaning against the camper door, making small talk with Patty, I was sipping my upteenth cup of coffee that day. Felipe had kindly offered me all the coffee I could drink on the house for the season. "If you don't drink it, I'll throw it away," he said, characteristically downplaying his generosity again. I did my small part by bringing my own container, a thermos mug with handle and drink spout. Bonjour's coffee was strong and addictive and kept my blood pumping, but I knew I was drinking too much of it as it was putting me on edge. Ellie returned to the camper for her regular visit to Emma's, gleaming like a newly decorated Christmas tree. It was clear from her manner she was carrying a big piece of news or had just achieved some major triumph. "Guess what?" she repeated several times. "Guess what? The Abbotts bought me for Christmas." "Ellie," I started. She could tell from my tone what I was getting at. That as a family, we've decided not to open gifts until we were all together on Christmas Day. It was a decision that we made several years ago before so that we could savor each gift. Lots of our Jane Street friends wanted us to open their gifts when we delivered them so they could watch. But when we explained our family ritual, people understood. What was it about this season that was affecting my daughter this way? It seemed like each time I turned around, Ellie was testing the limits. "But Dad," she started, I didn't open this one. "I mean, the Abbotts bought me a ticket for the Nutcracker. It was a Christmas present." The way she said it was as if it was the most wonderful Christmas present she'd ever received. Next thing I knew, Patty, still wearing her oven mitts, was hugging Ellie, and the two were dancing around the camper as if she'd just achieved something of significance, like winning a ribbon at the horse show or coming in first in a bike race. Ellie, this is wonderful, Patty exclaimed. Your dream come true for Christmas. In their excitement, neither my wife nor my daughter were paying me the least bit of mind. I knew I couldn't blame them for leaving me out of the loop. I'd actually removed myself by taking such a strong and vocal stance against the Nutcracker. It's hard to celebrate a victory when you were on the other side of the battle to begin with. The best thing to do, I reminded myself, was not to make too big a deal out of this, to go on with business at hand. Ellie and Patty stepped outside the camper where I returned to sweeping. Where are you going, Ellie? Patty asked. Tonight I'm going to get ready. The word ready fell out of her mouth like a loud thud, like something urgent and immediate. They started talking about what Ellie was going to wear. The discussion was short. It turned out there was just one candidate, her denim jumper. It was her only garment with a skirt. The only other thing she'd brought with her from Vermont were pants and jeans. She'd wear the jumper with white pantyhose and her work boots. Is it clean? Patty asked, concerned. I guess, Ellie started. Then her mind moved elsewhere. Mom, I don't have the right outfit. You don't have time. We don't have time to go shopping for something else, Patty said. Not if you're going tonight. I've got money. You know what, Ellie? Patty said, taking Ellie's long braid in her hand and rubbing it in a way that you would a cat to make her purr. You're going to look wonderful because it's you, not your clothing. That's going to the Nutcracker. I'm glad no one asked my opinion because buying a new outfit for one evening was the kind of extravagance that really ranked me and cut to the heart of my objection to this whole enterprise. So what do you think? Ellie asked, facing me directly. I couldn't tell if she was looking for my approval or wanting me to acknowledge her sudden good fortune. About what? I asked. She looked at me. You know what? The Nutcracker. Haven't we been over this? I mean, Anne Abbott gave me a ticket as a present. I think she wanted me to congratulate her for her achieving her goal so effortlessly. The problem was that she was getting what she wanted without having to work for it. Something about this sudden turn of events bothered me. So to tell you the truth, I started. I'm not crazy about this, and I'll tell you why. You made a commitment to start a business and sell candles and save up for something. And that's fine. I can admire that, even if I don't approve of your end goal. But then along comes some fairy godmother who falls out of the sky and waves a magic wand and gives you everything you want. I just don't want you to think you can get the things you wish for without having to earn them first. Life just doesn't work that way. She looked at me wirily, summoning all the wisdom of someone 3 times her age to her face. Sometimes it does. At this point, you need to learn important life lessons, I told her. I knew what I was saying sounded like a lecture, but it was something she needed to hear. You need to learn the value of hard work, of paying for what you want. If you work for 2 weeks and spend all your earnings on one night on the town, you might think twice the next time around. But if something just drops in your lap, you don't recognize its value. That's what I object to. It was hard to read Ellie just then, to see how she was reacting to my speech. It was clear she was listening intently, taking in every word. A customer exclaiming, "The balsam firs" at the far end of the stand on 8th Avenue caught my eye. As I turned to look, Ellie's eyes followed. Breaking the cardinal rule of retailing, I decided not to greet the customer immediately, but to stay with Ellie until I got through to her. The point is, it's not a good thing for you to expect the things you want to drop into your lap. I want you to grow up to be self-sufficient, not dependent on others. You need to learn that only you can make your dreams come true. If you rely on others to do that for you, I'm afraid you'll end up with disappointments. The ticket is costing you nothing, she answered. I don't even know why you're being so mean. Mean? I'm not being mean. I'm trying to help you. What I didn't tell her was that I was also worried sick that my little girl was developing a taste for fancy things I couldn't provide, a world I didn't travel in. Though I'd never personally developed such taste, I knew that life's luxuries could be a terrible trap. Ellie bent down and picked up a pine cone that had fallen loose from a wreath and laid it out of harm's way on her candle stand. You don't seem happy for me, she said. Not one bit. With that, Ellie turned and walked away to Emma's apartment, her small canvas bag holding her modest clothing slung over her shoulder behind her. As soon as she was out of sight, Patty was right in front of me. Timmy was holding her hand. She had one of those "I've got a score to settle" look on her face. I have one question for you, Billy. Why are you making a federal case out of this? Why can't you let Ellie have her fun? Now you've set her off with a dark cloud hanging over her, a cloud of your disapproval. That's not one question, it's two, I said, trying to make light of it, but she didn't laugh. She wasn't about to be distracted. Billy, she said, exasperated. You want to know why I'm having trouble with this? This whole Nutcracker thing came out of nowhere. Since when is Ellie interested in ballet? She's a tomboy. She likes horses and bikes and trees, not the ballet and fancy clothes and elegant things on the town. Patty was looking at me incredulously, and I realized that my voice had gotten loud. I was practically shouting. Patty's look told me she was about at the end of her rope. Someone's behavior only bothers you if there's something in yourself you don't like. Patty, I said, what are you talking about? I have no interest in the ballet. What is it about this situation that's getting to you? She asked. Maybe you're the one who wants riches. Maybe you're the one so obsessed with money this year. I rolled my eyes. You know what I'm worried about? You know why I'm worried about money? I'm trying to dig us out of a hole. Maybe you should have bought something fancy to wear. Maybe we should have bought something fancy to wear, she said. It's her big night and she's not dressed right. Patty, I said, you're starting to sound like Ellie now. Next thing you know, you're going to want to go to the Nutcracker. She looked at me fiercely. My only concern is Ellie and giving her a good childhood, happy memories to look back on. There was a touch of bitterness in her voice, as if to say that the two of us were working at cross purposes. Seeing that our discussion was going nowhere, she scooped up Timmy, crossed Jane Street, and went into Bonjour. Out there alone on the pavement with just my trees, I started mulling over the events of the day. I was beginning to wonder if Patty might be right about Ellie's venture to Lincoln Center and even her outfit. I wondered if I'd spoiled the evening for her. I couldn't shake what Patty had said to me, that maybe I was the one who wanted riches and was protesting too much about Ellie. Could it be that I, too, was drawn to the trappings of city life? That I was enjoying the fine coffee and bread and foods from Bonsoir and gifts from the customers a bit too much? Was there something that other than the good money to be made that kept luring me back to Manhattan year after year? More than once that season, I wished I'd never heard a thing about the Nutcracker. Not that my being disappointed and hurt didn't make perfect sense. I'd spent half the year making my daughter a gift, and I thought she wanted most only to find that she'd wanted something else more. But I also saw that I'd pained myself into a corner on this Nutcracker situation, a corner that would be hard to step out of. Then I remembered a resolution I'd made to myself when Ellie was born, that my relationship with her would be without judgment or conflict, flawless from beginning to end. And it made me so sad to think that we'd already had our first major row. A striking, expensively dressed customer interrupted my thoughts. She'd been leaning into the balsam fir stand, inhaling the sweet scent of the trees. Happy winter solstice, she called out. Most customers wish me a Merry Christmas or its politically correct cousin, Happy Holidays. But come to think of it, she was right. It was December 21st, the winter solstice. It was a sign of how wrapped up in our commerce of the city I had become, that it was 4 o'clock, and it had never occurred to me that this was the shortest day of the year. Are you having a happy one? I asked. Hanging in there, came her response. It never failed to surprise me how many people who'd considered successes in their life, well-dressed professionals with lots of money, who, if you ask them how they are, give you an answer that falls short of the ideal. They say they're surviving, getting by, or hanging in there. Few give you the impression that they're like my trees in the moment of opening, bursting with energy and life. Can I help you find a tree? I asked, pegging her as a candidate for one of our first-class Fraser firs. Just looking, she said. She didn't buy a tree, but instead selected a plain balsam wreath. She then cast her eyes to the small stand adjacent to the camper where Henry was setting up a box crate, peddling his wares along with Ellie's, for which, in her absence, he charged her a commission. After carefully considering several of the candles, she selected one with a thick base. Did you make these? She asked Henry. No, my sister did. I'm selling them for her. She's going to see the Nutcracker. Well, aren't you the diligent worker? She exclaimed. What's your name? When he told her, his eyes brightened and a smile started to work on her mouth. Her eyes brightened. My grandfather was named Henry. You don't hear it much in boys your age. My great-grandfather was named Henry, too, he said. That's who I was named for for, and someday when I grow up, I'm going to get his watch. She scooped up a handful of branches from Henry and paid him for them and the candle. Come back and see us, he said. The way he said it, I could tell he really meant it. Sales had been brisk all that evening. I helped match several customers with their trees, including a young father who had come to select a tree with a little redheaded girl in tow. The girl, who told me her name was Erica, was a bit younger than Ellie. I soon learned that she was his stepdaughter. He told me, this is our first Christmas together. Her mother and I were married on June 26th. I handed Erica a balsam bough for good luck. Just then, another girl standing on the corner right across the street caught my eye. She looked like a beautiful little princess all decked out in party clothes. She had long golden hair like Ellie's. It took a moment, maybe more than a moment, for me to realize that it was Ellie. She was wearing a black velvet jumper, a frilly white blouse with puffy sleeves, and had a black cape flung over her shoulders, an outfit that seemed tailor-made for her. Every accessory was right. She had on white stockings and black patent leather shoes. Her hair was all artfully piled on her head and fastened together under a black velvet hair bow. But as beautiful as she looked that night, the thing that would be etched forever in my memory was the look on her face. I'd never seen Ellie look that way. She was without question the prettiest little girl in the world, more beautiful than I'd ever realized. It was her radiance that overwhelmed me. Her face shone with poise, confidence, excitement, delight, and anticipation. Like Ellie, I got so caught up in the fairy tale that I temporarily lost all my bearings. At that moment, I didn't even stop to consider where the clothes had come from, and my earlier disapproval was as remote as summertime. I wanted nothing more than to hug her and wish her well, but for an instant, I felt intimidated. Yes, intimidated by my own daughter. I wanted her to come my way so I could take a closer look. I wanted her to rush up and call me Daddy and ask me what I thought. Sure enough, she and Emma did head my way, and I felt my heart surge. As I stood there watching them approach, I thought back to when Ellie had left for the first time to spend the night with Emma. The girls were 4 then. I remembered how she clung to me, how she said she didn't want to go anywhere if I could go too. I told her that I'd always be with her no matter where she went. She told me how she could hardly wait to get back to tell me all about it. Back then, my approval meant the world to her, but that was long ago. This time, she walked regally across the street and down the sidewalk toward me, a self-poised girl, no longer little. It was not hard to imagine the worldly, sophisticated woman she would someday become. At her side, Emma looked dazzling in a burgundy velvet dress with a white lacy collar and cuffs. I considered what to say. I wanted it to be something witty, something memorable, something to let her know I wasn't mad anymore. Something to make light of the whole situation. I would tease her with her line like, I found something to wear at the bottom of your suitcase, did you? But Ellie and Emma breezed right by me without so much as a hello, whispering in that conspiratorial nose in the air way the girls and women do when men who hold no interest for them. They stepped into the camper to say goodbye to Patty. Out there on the sidewalk with my trees, the pavement felt cold under my feet, and my arms felt as limp as sawed-off limbs. The next thing I saw was Ellie back on the street corner, throwing her arm up in the air like a veteran New Yorker. A cab was curbside in an instant. She, Emma, and Anne scooted in, and just as quickly as it came, the cab vanished into the line of traffic. Ellie, I called out, wanting more than anything to say goodbye. But a honk from an impatient cabbie behind them drowned me out. As I stood there at the corner, it occurred to me that Patty was wrong about one thing. Ellie had not left under a dark cloud of my disapproval. She was off to have a big night of her own, the biggest night of her life. End of chapter 4.